Welcome, everybody, to Research Roadshow and the next episode of Protecting the Nest. I'm John Wilkins, and my co host today is Carol McIntosh. Good morning, Carol.
Morning, John. Nice to see you. It's bright, still bright and early here in Oregon.
Is it still 30 degrees?
Oh no, it's a little warmer. It's probably getting in around the 40s, I'd say. Yeah, it's not so cold.
Well, it's nice here in Atlanta. It's an even 69 degrees and a little bit rainy, but I'll take it over the Boston weather.
Yeah, we're not going to get up to 69 for quite a while, I don't think. We got to wait till sometimes we get a little spurt in February or even January. If you go to the beach, it's 10 degrees warmer, but probably not here. We might get up to 69.
Well, what's the topic for today, Carol?
Well, there were just some real interesting comments and shows that that really struck me as being appropriate for the topics for protecting the nest. So I wanted to dig into some of those. I think I told you earlier, but Professor Hamamoto just had a over-the-top week, I thought, with his interview with Jesse, and then his interview with Lena Poo, and then Manny Grossman, all had really similar topics. It's funny. I mean, I was talking with John about physics and this kind of new physics, but it fits right into all those topics too. And John had some really interesting observations, and maybe he talked about it this morning. I wasn't able to catch the show yet, his morning show, because I've got a lot of my wards in the morning. So but I did, maybe we'll start with his wonderful comment. I showed him a picture of a resonant standing wave of sound in water, and what it is, and then light shining through it, so you can actually see the resonance of sound in the water, what it does to water. And oh, there, hi Amber.
Morning, Amber.
Hey.
Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here, because the show I did with John last night, poor Corky could never get in, and we'd worked on this thing together. Corky spent years studying this stuff, and it was really sad that neither John nor I realized, and I don't think we had to do this, but it takes 24 hours if you've never been on StreamYard, yeah. So
here's another tip.
He had a new computer, and he's never been on StreamYard before anyway.
Let me tell you a tip of what I have to do. So for some reason on my computer and my phone, it tells me it can't go straight to StreamYard. So I have to copy and paste it onto Safari to then get in. So when he has his new computer, when you do a show, if he gets stuck again, it's because he's going to have to copy, paste, put in the Safari search bar, and then it'll pop up.
So it works for Safari for you. I just do it in Firefox, which is
and I don't have Firefox. That's probably why. So just make sure that if he starts to have problems, remember that it could be that.
I think he actually got a a reply from them saying it takes 24 hours to do some trusted news initiative on him or something, like there's a waiting period. He has to be qualified and
be vetted.
But I don't remember we had to do that.
You don't. This is how crazy the world is getting. Like the censorship, and are you worthy? Like, are you worthy is the most elitist. Like, we live in some kind of dominion. Wow. That's what it is. And I've been really stressed at looking at all these heroes popping up, and they're going to save the day. But when you look in their past, like, they're totally supportive of elitism and looking at people as if, well, I'm a little bit better than you. And it's very, it's very stressful. when you look at really
Yeah,
what's
I
happening.
think it's even more than that. And I actually read that the principle that we're moving into now with this ultra security world is no trust. That's what they call it. They call it no trust. So everything we do online has to be correct to prove that we're trustworthy. So I've run into horrible problems, like with my bank turning off my credit cards when I'm traveling because I forgot to tell them. And then I have to go through all these things and I can't remember, and I'm stressed out, and I'm in the airport or I'm standing on some busy road somewhere. It's like I can't think. I can't remember my 4 numbers if I
Get
can't
this,
write them
Carol.
down.
Get this. Yesterday, I get this alert because I signed up because so much hacking goes on. It's like our bank accounts have been hacked before everything. So we've got like this ultra security on it. I get a text alert that says that McAfee just charged me $149. And I'm like, McAfee, we're not with McAfee. We never have been. We go through Geek Squad. We go through like these other virus protection services. So I call my husband. I ask, he's like, no, that's not a charge. And he goes, when I call the bank, they go and look back. There's a bunch of Proton Mail and McAfee charges. None of them did we say okay to. And I didn't give any of them my credit card information because I got the free Proton stuff. I don't have the other. And so I'm like, what? So they're putting another freeze. So now if I go outside, the perimeter in North Georgia, I better call to let my bank know. I might use my debit card.
But I've tried to call them when I was in the car going someplace, realizing, I won't be able to buy gas. And you have to wait on hold for like 2 hours to get through. And and you can use up your whole battery waiting for the, 24 or 59 calls ahead of you. So it's this crazy system. But what it is the walls are closing down on being able to move.
Maybe maybe this whole thing is to remind us technology is not our God. Maybe it's to remind us when we put all of our livelihoods on something that has to transfer through the air. Like we started because 2 of the times we were hacked was because I used my debit card at the gas station and they got my information. So now I'll either bring cash, which is what I prefer to do when I go to the gas station, or I have to go in to go to the debit machine to then type in my debit number so that the bank knows, okay, she knows her debit number to type in. Because they gave me all these tips the last time. Now they have more tips. That's the thing. They sent us a sheet of like how to keep your stuff safe. They now are going to send me with the a whole other list. And I labeled all the stuff. I got out the list. They said, no, there's more now. And I was like, wow, they're finding every which way to steal stuff. That's great. So go on about the water. I don't want to interrupt. I want to hear. I'm very excited about this.
Okay. Well, I sent John some pictures from the slideshow last night, and I wanted to just talk about John O'Loughlin's reaction to seeing these pictures. And the pictures are of, I'll go to the first one first, the one before that, so you can understand it. Yeah, this is a standing wave that's in a bowl of water. You can't see the bowl because the bowl is it's touching the 5 nodes there, but it's a circular bowl, like a singing bowl. And then the frequency that's going into this is just water. And there's a frequency of, I think it says 22.2 hertz. And then they shine light through the water. And at first it's all kind of chaotic as it's tuning up. But once it gets to this resonance, then it just quickly coheres into this beautiful shape. And this is a fractal shape. And what the guy, who's John Stuart Reid, says about it is that every molecule of water in that bowl is making that shape. So it's totally fractal. And then if you go to the next slide.
Carol, will you explain to others what fractal means, just in case?
Fractal means a self-similar shape that is repeated on many different scales.
Okay.
So you have the big bowl of water making this shape, and you have every molecule making the exact same shape. And this happens everywhere in nature. Nature has all these self-similar shapes going on. It's a fractal universe. And we'll look at that in a moment. But the picture that you just went away from, go back to that.
Okay, I'm going back.
Sound.
A good example of a fractal is a river. If you show somebody a picture of a river, they can't tell how long it is.
But the cool thing about a river is if you measure the point of origin to the point it meets the sea, and you divide the actual length into 3, if you multiply it by pi, that's the length of the river. The ratio of pi actually holds to free-flowing water as well as it does to a circle.
Right.
So that's pretty cool too. Just how the math is intrinsic to nature. So this is a picture. We think when we make a sound that it looks like this oscilloscope sound. This just on picture number left. You see just this simple sound. But the reality is that the sound is resonating from the point of origin. The middle of the sound is your mouth, and your head is the resonant amplifier.
Carol, now I think I understand why fear is promoted, hatred is promoted, anger is promoted, and then they actually attack at women about this, knowing we're the most sensitive and we're the most protective of our young when it comes to the maternal. And when women start to get frustrated and upset, they start to let men know we're not okay with this. And so if you push that fear, if you push that fear, then when we speak, that beautiful looking thing turns into not so pretty.
And
then it
back to the chaos. Yeah, the non-resonance.
Wow.
Yeah. But what John's comment was so wonderful, because he was really astounded by that picture. He'd never realized what sound looked like. And he said, I'm a musician. I'm a singer, and I sing with symphonies and other people, and the idea of what that does in a concert hall, what that shape is happening that people are feeling inside themselves, because they're mostly water. We're like this liquid crystal. We talked about that before. So I don't know. I loved his reaction and his comment.
Carol, I can tell you this last weekend we had our Georgia Symphony Orchestra concert. And you've got 120 people that sing. Not everyone's going to agree on anything. And in fact, sometimes we, really have it out. A lot of us came back after mandates were lifted and stuff. And when we sang, it was like we had been best friends forever. Like there was nothing that could break that bond because of our singing together. We're glancing over at each other, tears in our eyes. And it's just, you get this overwhelming emotion. And then afterwards, as everyone starts to meander around and they bump into each other in the hall and the kids are screaming, I want cookies. They're going to see Santa. People are trying to hustle and bustle to get to restaurants and other things. That reality and the heaviness that like ebbs and flows depending on who you walk by, whether they're in a great mood and they're saying that was wonderful. And, or they're saying, move, please. Those are the things that you get ripped back into reality. But now I understand what John said and what he meant, because it's just this feeling, you feel like you're floating a little bit and you feel like you've connected with the audience and they're looking at you in this. At first they sit down like, is this worth my money? I hope this is good. And then, there's like this connection, especially when we reach that vibration in our song where every note is hit. Everything is powerful. Everyone is emotional, and you can feel the audience come back at you, and then you're going back at the audience. It's a real thing, and it's amazing. But I think it always depends on the material you're singing and what you're saying, because you can do some horrific things.
I'm not a singer like you and John are, but I did used to sing in choirs when I was a kid, and
that means you're a singer.
When I was in college, they didn't have a symphonic choir with the Portland Orchestra, so they used the college's choirs to come and be the symphonic orchestra, and we did Beethoven's Ninth.
Oh,
And
we're doing Carmina Burana this
oh,
next
that's
day.
a great one.
Woo!
Yeah.
And that one,
But that,
like
that
you get a pit in your stomach at some parts of the song, and at the end you just feel like your body just keeps going upwards and upwards, and then it ends, and everyone's sitting there like, what just happened? It is one of my favorite pieces to perform.
Well, it's a pentatonic scale, Carmina Burana, so it's more primordial. You know, the different scales, like, you know, I think it's Phrygian, so it's got those minor.
It makes your body like
it's
throughout it, and you're feeling like this really great flow, and then it's like so those emotions are, you're actually feeling the carnality of life.
Well, it's modal. Yeah.
Yes. Where Beethoven's Ninth is, you just feel like you're being lifted. You can't be unlifted. And afterwards, we always like to end with that one, because afterwards we go into the lobby and everyone is just, you can see like there's like this, everyone wants to hold hands and hug. It's really great. Really great song.
Well, yeah, to sing it is so powerful, you know, just to be immersed within it. It's just totally amazing.
I think that's where people get tricked into globalism and things like that, because you take a song like that and it's beautiful. But what makes it beautiful is that we're all brothers. We're all ourselves. We all live in sovereign countries. We all have our own identity, not immersed into one conglomerate blob. Right. So people need to have that discernment of, let's sing that song. Let's live Beethoven's Ninth, but let's not take away someone else's sovereignty and identity while we do.
Well, on the Ivy League campuses, you never hear classical music. And a couple of weeks ago on Jesse Hall's show, I made the comment that many of the kids at Stanford and Georgia Tech and MIT are becoming more like robots, and the robots are becoming more human. And Jesse's chat blew up, and everybody said, "Yeah, that's right." Well, why is that? Because they're purposely depriving the kids of Bach and Beethoven and anything, you know, classical music. They're driving them into these little bubbles where there's only a 3D billiard ball world, and there's no energy, there's no life, no nothing.
Yeah, the billboards for, I guess we call it Fred Meyer's, you call it Kroger's. It's all over the place. And those billboards of the Lego people, they don't have legs. They're just blobs. You know, in fact, John, before you came in, that blob you were without your image, just that a round circle and the shoulders and disconnected from everything. We're seeing that on billboards everywhere we go. You know, like, that's what people are. No, that's not what people are. We're these resonant, complex, incredibly complex. And that's one thing that I love too about complexity. I've just read a little bit about complexity, but no matter what the scale is, complexity doesn't diminish or increase in a fractal situation. It's just always as complex as it is. You know, you don't get less when it's smaller or more when it's bigger. So we have this idea that, well, we're this size and this is very complex and we're the height of whatever. But really, it's just as complex when you go deep down inside. Same complexity. So that's cool.
I agree. And what I think my biggest thing, or I feel like my biggest task, is to teach my kids about discernment, because the type of darkness that we're all dealing with is they're counting on the kindness and the forgiveness and the trusting nature. So it's kind of like, well, if I put out this resonance, it's always positive, always good, always sees the good in people. And I always think, oh, there's nothing here to worry about. I might find myself with a brain chip, right? So we need to understand that if you be kind, you put out goodness, charity, love, helpfulness, forgiveness, but do not forget. And to always remember that it's your job to protect your heart, not just to give it away freely to those who may tear it into pieces, because we're only human. And if we don't want to be robots, we can't expect for that human love and tenderness to not be hurt or marred by those who would take advantage of it. So we have to protect our heart. So I'm trying to teach my children about being a friend, always being there for whoever, no matter what their opinion is, if there's an emergency, jump up, help them up. If they drop something, jump up, hand it to them. But do not allow for them to destroy your heart. Do not then think I have to compromise who I am in order to get acceptance from them. A good friend accepts you for who you are. A good friend allows you to be who you are. And a good friend cherishes who you are because they want to learn from you. And so this discernment, I think, is the bigger issue, because we should ask ourselves, why aren't Ivy League places having this classical music? But in the same token, when it comes to giving out stimulus, most of what they say the stimulus is going to is the arts, right? But then it's not reflected in the children that they're growing in the
they're taking it
class.
away,
right?
taking
And so
away
then,
the arts.
and I saw all of the restrictions that came along with the PPE for those orchestras and places who went for that PPE because they were shut down. They couldn't have any concerts. And so that they would have had to, and there were so many that shut their doors that don't exist anymore, that existed for 100 years, 80 years, 70 years. And, it'll take forever to build them back up if they even do it. And that was really the ugly thing, is you can stay open, but you're going to have to get money from us or you won't survive. Oh, and if you get money from us, these are the regulations you're going to have to do. So you're going to have to join our legion. You're going to have to join our dominion and legion of fear and anxiety and stress, where we don't live what we say we live, but we're supporting you. Yay, the arts. And it's like, what? You're like, I had to dismiss myself from the arts. What? Like, people who are creative, who are supposed to be who they are, have their own independence.
Yeah, the same thing happened to me. I couldn't go to art events, and I still can't without the vaccine. Everything else is open, but because of they accepted money to keep going, they put
how they destroyed the arts
on it.
That's how it's destroyed. That's how they.
Amber, I was reminded of you. Yeah. I was reminded of you this week by Lena Poo. She was on Hamamoto's. He interviewed her, and she's such an activist, and so are you. You're a different kind of activist because you are so verbal about it. But she didn't realize what powerful effect her actions had. That was several years ago. Several years ago, she took the ordinance from her city about putting up cell towers and stuff. And she went through it and said, well, this is what we have to do to be fair, to be legal, to meet the requirements. Here's my recommendations. She spent a lot of time doing that. And then she just thought it went into the ether and nothing happened. But then she found out just this Thanksgiving, I think, just really recently, she found out because Hamamoto found an article written about what are the best ordinances in the country that keep these towers away, these dangerous things that damage people. And her city of, it was around Davis, wherever her community is, that she'd made this presentation, was the premier example, because they'd accepted every single one of her recommendations and she didn't even know it. But her, taking the time to look at it, taking the time to really understand it and make a comment that was just a public person's comment, had this effect, this incredible effect of having the best regulations in the entire country to try to keep this dangerous radiation from homes and schools and all these things. So it was more than just the notice of liability. It was really, she gave her ideas as to how to rewrite the actual specific ordinance and how to enforce it.
Nice.
How to get it enforced. So that was really wonderful. And I thought, our example here is you. You're so good at speaking up and just saying what you think, what you discern, what needs to happen because of what makes sense, common sense, using that to change your environment as one person. And that's an example of one little teeny node, one human making a big difference.
I think
just on that point, Carol, I was talking with a friend of my sister's up in Cleveland over Thanksgiving, and she's in her early 50s, and she's no more than 110 pounds, and she says, "Well, what can I do in my high school?" She teaches a middle school, and I said, "One person." I pointed to Julian Assange. Look what one person can do. One person. And she says, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not used to that kind of thing." And so I kept at her and I kept at her, and I convinced her to at least go and get a few other teachers and make a kind of club, to talk about these things.
Well, I have a great example, actually. This was some goofy science experiment that happened a long time, genetic one, an early genetic experiment. And they bred these poor mice to be completely deaf. And what they were missing were the little hairs in their ears that amplify the sound. They were just gone. And then they did a gene splicing of putting the correct gene in just a couple of cells in this mice. And within a short period of time, the mice could hear again. So, just that teeny little thing can make a big difference. Now, of course, we're in this system now where all these teeny little gene splices are causing a lot of problems. So, but we still have our agency, and we can point it out. We can talk about it. We can put the vibrations out into the world, and I think that's what we're doing. If you act even within our nest, even just very locally, it still gets out there. It spreads out. It keeps going.
If I were to give somebody a tool.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, my phone just rang.
There you are.
My phone. Yeah, sorry, my phone just rang. I'm on my phone. If I were to give somebody a small tool of how to do this discernment and how to stand up when you have this big fear or something lands you in the face, is if you start to get a reaction to something and you're like, "Oh, this is awful. I don't know what to do. What are we going to do about this?" Stop. Write down what you're feeling. Write down what you just heard. Write that down, what that means to you, and how you think it would best be you move forward. So, like when I heard, "Oh, things are going to be mandated because we want everyone to be safe," my idea was, okay, but if people don't do it because of other reasons, maybe it's religious, maybe it's immunocompromisation and their doctor says no, maybe they already have natural immunity. That's a blanket statement that's supposed to fit everybody, and everybody is different. And so since everyone's different, this is an unfair layout. And right now, it doesn't matter who's doing it. It matters that it's being done. And I can't get sucked up into this because of fear. If my first reaction is, I don't think this fits my lifestyle and what's good for me, if I can't change that within the system, I pull back away from that. I still remain kind, and I try to see it from other people's perspectives who might push for it because they're afraid, and still be their friend and send them a letter like, "Oh my gosh, I remember, that shirt you wore 3 years ago. I just found this in my closet. I didn't know we had the same shirt." Whatever, just to let them know you still exist and you care about them, but not to join them on the level of that and always bring in that happiness. Because if they're going to tell a group of people, "You have autonomy over my body, my mind, my soul, and my spirit," and I am full of fear, tell me what to do, they've been compromised emotionally. And so you can't go at them to try to rip away that emotion by bringing them to your emotion. All you can do is try to replace that fear with kindness, love, happiness, good stories, funny things. And I think the most difficult thing is when people go onto these social media platforms and they want you to be damning the man and pushing back. But you might grab a couple of people who are already in your camp, but you're not going to grab those who are lost, confused, full of fear, wondering, what's going on. Someone who just needs a laugh, someone who needs to be brought out of that fear, fear,
Mm-hmm.
fear, death,
Sort of
death,
downward
death.
spiral.
Exactly. And so I wish every time I posted on social media or I had something to say, it was like, yeah, stick it up your wazoo. But I can't, because I need for people who are continuing to allow this fear and this anxiety to grow. I need to have, like, lessen that fear in them. I need to step in their shoes and say, what is it that they like? Oh, I remember they like this comedian. I'm going to send them this little clip. This is funny. I remember. And so sometimes you come off as like milk toast or namby-pamby, or you're not discussing the difficult issues. I have plenty of venues to do that in, but there's too many people that are lost. They're
Mm-hmm.
fearful, and they don't know where to turn. And if they know that you're a consistent friend who always has a kind word, when it becomes crucial, they might ask you, and then you can inform them. And I know it's about patience, endurance. It is. But,
And it's about
sometimes you have to choose the kind way.
Switching systems too. I think one of the things I learned in yoga is that a sharp inhale puts you in fight or flight. Just doing that action, it changes your entire nervous system over to, nervous system B, which is supposed to not be dominant.
Yes.
But the opposite trigger to get into the rest and digest is a long sigh. And it kind of says, I'm safe. This is good. It just relaxes everything, and it completely switches you out of that state. But it is a lot harder to switch you out of the fear state than it is to switch you into it, because it can happen so quickly.
And that's why some of these companies,
longer to get it out.
some of these companies that'll push like these anti-anxiety meds, right?
Mhm.
I think what happens is we're not having our doctors tell us about how to decrease our anxiety through breathing, through actually writing down in a journal how we feel. When you release that out of your body, even if you're just walking around your house talking to yourself, there's nothing wrong with screaming, ah, and getting it all out and being done. There's nothing wrong with crying and being done. You've got to release it. You just have to release it in a way that's healthy for you, instead of shoving a pill down your throat to push it down more. And to then, like, if everyone's on a pill that says just be happy, horrendous things will happen all around you. And my grandmother, this is crazy. So my grandmother was having anxiety, and she was the sweetest lady. She had a daycare, and over her span of like 20 years, she kept over 130 something kids. And still to that day, kids who graduated from college came to see her, and they called her Mama Yop. Mama Yop, hey, I graduated. She's like, oh my goodness. Had everyone's baby pictures. Like, the family thought she loved everybody else's kids more than all of us. We get jealous. Oh, what about me? And then she'd say, when the kids go home, I'm all yours. She devoted her whole life to, she would either be baking, cooking, or when those kids went away and she closed her daycare, she didn't know what to do, and she was sad. And so the doctor put her on Paxil. She would walk around, and no matter what was happening, she had a goofy grin. After about 2 months, she said, I can't be on this. She said, I can't cry anymore. I like to cry. If I'm talking to my child, and my child did something silly or stupid, I like to say, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? And I don't even feel that. I'm just saying, well, I'm sure it's okay. And instead, I float around. I don't even know who I am, and everything's happy. And so that's how there might be a lot of people voting in particular ways, behaving in particular ways, because they are numb to the egregious crazy that's happening, and they don't see it. Like, I'm in a group of over 70 women in a book club, and there's like only 10 of us that aren't on some kind of anti-anxiety or like calming pharmaceutical.
Well, yeah, if you use that kind of crutch to calm you down, then it's an addiction. And the downside is, if you do try to get off of it, it has a horrific downside. I mean, I've witnessed that, unfortunately, too many times in my own family, with people trying to deal with those kind of issues. And it is just a horrific cycle that is very difficult to break, and it hurts all the people around you when you try.
Well, I
Because
feel like,
getting out of it to detox it is
well, it
just
makes people
the opposite.
numb to actually
Mhm.
handle, like, if there's a crisis in your family, you have to face it, you have to handle it, you have to be present, you have to be present. And a lot of people I see that, like, all around them things are falling apart, but they're just being present.
Yeah. But the
Versus,
down cycle is actually adding anxiety. So you
yes,
go into the numbness, but then when it wears off, you go into a more of an anxious state. So you want more. I don't
yes.
like this, so I want more. And then to actually try to wean yourself off, it puts you in it's a danger to everybody.
Yeah. Well, I remember being at a holiday event. It was 2 or 3 years ago when everyone was saying what medications they took. And I laughed and
Wow.
I said Luden's cough drops. This before the
Vitamin
pandemic, and
D.
I said I really like those. They taste like cherry, but I think they're candy. And they looked at me and they go, "Oh yeah." And I said, "No, I just I like being upset when I'm upset. I like being happy when I'm happy. I like my emotions. I like
Mhm.
experiencing emotions. And then I like to challenge myself to see, like, how do I deal with this?" And my biggest thing is, as a mom, being hot headed when I'm disrespected by my kids. I'm like, no, this is not going to stand. Excuse me. And so these are things that we're all working on in this house, because mommy is like, I'll do anything for you, but there has to be mutual
Well,
respect. And of course, these are boys, they're stubborn, they're
Mhm.
pushing the limits. You got, they
And they're
haven't
getting
reached
into
quite
ego,
teenager
that
yet. They got
their
a smart
job is to
mouth.
develop their ego right there as they get
Yes.
into
And
adolescence.
I want to, like, I don't want to take away that malehood, that dominance, but I'm also not going to be a stepping stool or a pincushion. Like, no, 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 no. Mama doesn't play that. So I'm finding my footing. They're finding their footing. And I let them know, hey, we're all going to make mistakes. But your mom's hot headed. Like, look at how I am a lot, but I'm not gonna drink to try to deal with you. I'm not going to take a pill to try to be calm with you. Just let me know if you're upset. I'll let you know if I'm upset. We hammer it out. That's how our family will work. We will not hold things in. We will not be silent. We will not pout. We will sit down. We will talk. We will discuss. We are not going to. We are going to face reality every day, because I can't send them into the world and then shelter them from every emotion and feeling, because I love them so much. They have to see their mom angry, so that when their wife loses it, they're not like, this woman's crazy. My mom was always nice. They're like, well, at least she's not as crazy as my mom was, so I love her. Because there's a lot of boys that get out in the world and their mama was just doting all over them, and then they get married and reality hits, and a woman's like, stop laying your stuff in the bathroom. I'm not picking up your wet towels. What's wrong with you? And they're like, my mama is dead. And it's like, no, 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 no. My kids are gonna know, don't upset your wife. And they're gonna be ready for it, and then they're gonna be able to handle it. They're gonna be able to sit down, have a discussion, and hear her heart. And hopefully they marry someone who she hears their heart, whether they get married or not, or however it goes. I have to prepare them for such things. And it's a hard
Mhm.
preparation. I just want to be their buddy. I want to cuddle. I want to tell them they're just so cute. That is not preparing them for anything. So it's hard, because I just want to be happy. I don't want to be the heavy, but I will, in order to raise them.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do.
it,
And it is a hard job. It's
it
probably the
is.
hardest job on
I don't like
earth.
to be the bad guy. You said no. Why? Because you didn't pick up your clothes and you didn't do this, so we're not going. Please. I already said no. Maybe tomorrow night. You're so unfair. No, I'm not. This is the way these consequences work. It sucks, because I wanted to go. I wanted to go to the event. So now I've learned, if I really want to go somewhere, that's not the punishment. Like, it's going to be something else.
it's so easy nowadays to just, for parents, to just say, to settle for the mediocre, to not go above and beyond, to, either with your kids, especially with the teenagers, or with for example, the parent teacher conference, or, in your social settings. It's so easy to just go with the flow, to do what everybody else is doing. And that is what's really required. And I think that that's a cornerstone of protecting the nest, is how to not be mediocre, how to go above and set an example for everyone around you.
Well, it's so easy these days, I think, to just let technology take over. That's a real danger in parenting. That is really, it's just always there. It's so ubiquitous everywhere at all ages. And the messages are terrible if you
They are.
actually look at it. The stuff that has the potential, that's aimed at kids, is, it's the same stuff we're getting. People are horrible, people are terrible, everybody fights all the time. It's
It's an example that I
fear.
have of like, how am I heavy? Well, last night we went to my youngest at his school, his like Christmas concert, and he got to speak about the snake in the garden. And so and then all these kids said this little part. But afterwards I knew, because there was a girl who started off playing really great piano. Now we have a piano. We want our kids to play piano, and they said they want to play piano. We got them a few lessons, but my kids are notorious for saying, I want to do this. And then we start to do it, and then they're not doing it. And so I'll look at them, oh, well, she's really good. Well, you would be, but you don't practice. Well, and they're like, well, why? When I was at basketball, I only got put in the game twice. Because you're not good enough. And other people will be like, Amber, what? I'm like, sorry, it's called reality. If you want it, you go after it. I know that you're serious about basketball. If not only you go to practice, but you get home and we have a basketball goal and you ask me to move my car so you can shoot baskets. That's how I know you're serious. If I don't see that, I'm not going to pity you on the bench. Sorry. And I might not even come to the game if you're not even practicing. Why am I going to waste my time to go somewhere to watch you sit there, and then you're going to be upset later, but you're not practicing to get to be a starter, to be in it, to push past it. I'm not here to give you a participation trophy. I'm here to tell you the hard truth. You want me there? Show me you want it. Show me you're going after it. Now, if you give it your all and you're just an average player, I'll be the loudest cheerleader. I'm not expecting you to be Michael Jordan, but don't tell me to be there and you don't practice and your heart's not in it, and then you want me to praise you. There's nothing to praise. But if you give your 100% and you're still benched, I'll be there every game. I will be there. I will support you, but I've got to see that it's something you're passionate about, and I've got to see you put yourself into it. And parents just don't say that now.
Well, it's just so easy. Yeah, it's so easy to practice not having that. You're literally, whatever you're doing is your practice. And so if your practice is watching video games or just sitting on the couch or whatever, and I think this whole COVID years for children, they couldn't go out, they couldn't do their normal activities, and it broke that good habits, of practice.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to realize that whatever we're doing is our practice. Yeah. So you want to make it be that it's going to get you something that is going to bring you happiness and joy and accomplishment, and all those things are at the end of it. And yeah,
it's definitely balance. I mean,
mm-hmm.
Usually if it's been a particularly rough day and they, that in one hand they want this and the other hand they're not doing anything to gain that, the hard truths are told, but at the end of the day, it's big hugs. I love you, and you mean so much to me, and that's why I'm going to tell you the truth, because I love you. If I didn't love you, I would just say, okay, great. Oh, you're great, just to get you out of my way. I could get you out of my way in 30 seconds by praising you and giving you a cookie. I'm not going to do that because I love you, and I'm here to guide you, so when you enter that real world, nobody can break you, because I told you all the things that you could work on, the things that were wonderful about yourself, the things that you hurt yourself by doing, and the things that others might expect from you that if you in your soul and in your moral standing don't want to do, this is how you stand up to it. This is how you become a friend, and give you examples of where I messed up, where I excel, but then allow you that independence. But I can't send you out there without telling you first. And I will tell you, and I will show you whether or not you do it once you're out of my house. So be it. Let the chips fall where they may. You have your own relationship with God. Like, that's between you and the universe. And now I've done my job, and I love you. Good luck. And I'll be here for you unless, you don't want me to. But, I feel like I want those child years to be full of just giggles and love and praises. But this world is insane, and I have to prepare them. And I feel like, I love them to that point where it's not everything is going to be candy and roses. And I'm just glad that they're accepting of that. And I think that helps that they're little boys, because if my mom was more passive, my dad was not. My mom told me that as a girl, I'd roll my eyes and that's so unfair and you're being mean, because I talked back and stuff like that. But like, I'm glad they're little boys, because they go, okay, mom, and they just accept it. But it's like, I watch these kids, they push people around. There'll be an elderly couple trying to enter the mall. Two younger boys will just push in front of them, open the door, shut them, and the elderly people are just standing there. And I'll walk in and go, excuse me, young man, come here. Why did you just shut the door? And they were walking through. Could you have held the door? Here, let me get this for you. Come on in. And then the boys will roll their eyes at me. Like, who are you? I mean, the kids have become entitled and out of control, and parents don't know what they're creating. They're creating narcissists that won't take care of them when they get older. When the parents need their children the most, they created narcissists that won't be there for them. And we're in danger. And so I would hope that anybody that hears this is being, be gentle, be loving to your children, but also teach them, because these are the kids who need to have that feeling and emotion to take care of you when you're older.
Well, that's about taking responsibility, and going ahead and not being afraid to take it on, and I think you're such a great example of that. But there's different ways to do it, and like the way Lena Poo did it, that I observed was, she just did it, but then she didn't even realize the power of what it was she did. And another example was the other interview Hamamoto did with Manny Grossman. He was talking about one of my favorite books in the world, One Straw Revolution, by Masanobu Fukuoka. And he's a Japanese guy who kind of stumbled into, before World War II, he was an engineer, and he had this good job, and his parents were farmers, and he'd go off. They were all very proud of him. He had the good job, and the war started, and something happened to him. He got ill, and he nearly died. And having that epiphany of going through that process, he realized that there was more that he needed to get in touch with. And he left his good job, which was completely unheard of in Japan at that time, because he had moved up in the world. And he went back to the farm, and he just started observing, as a scientist, how nature did things. And the idea of the one straw revolution is that by letting the plants decompose in the field, that's how he figured out how organic gardening actually worked, and got a better yield than all the chemicals that were just coming in then. All the chemicals and all that stuff was happening. And just by him observing nature and what he called do nothing farming, you just kind of let it happen and watch it. And, you just do these little augmentations to help nudge it along, and you get something that's much greater than all the forcing of, plowing and chemicals and all that stuff. It looks like it's doing better, but it really isn't. It's really destroying over time.
There's an old Irish way that I found was the best way that we've grown our potatoes. So you just lay some dirt. You barely take a pitchfork and just kind of move the dirt around. You're not really like
Mm-hmm.
moving it. You're not taking it and scrunching it all over the place. But you then mound some dirt on top and then put hay straw. You put
Yeah.
holes in the hay straw, put the potato nubs, and then you layer it. Once those come up, you do another layer of potatoes and you put
Mm-hmm.
hay straw. And so you've got a huge mound and it's hay straw. And then as you pull it out, you've got such a huge amount of potatoes. And then all you do is churn it all, and then you spread it out, and then the next time you can do 2 or 3 mounds of potatoes like that, because as you pull the straw and just barely fork the ground, you haven't depleted it, you've actually
Mm-hmm.
added to it.
Right. You're adding to it. Yeah.
And
That's
so
the
when
whole
I saw
point.
the video, this lady did it the style was made in like the 1700s in
Mm-hmm.
Ireland, and then it just progressed from there. And now there's people that have potatoes pretty much all year because they can do it and layer it where no matter what the weather is, you still have. Now they're not as big and they're not as, but once they've stored some of it, they even have like beside some of these mounds where they've carved out a piece of the ground, filled it with straw, and actually did a mud cake where it becomes
Mm.
like a mini fridge kind of thing in the dark, and they store some of the potatoes from each mound for the winter months right beside the
Yeah.
mound.
Well, that's exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's how to observe and do simple things using materials that are there and natural and available to just do augmentation. I think part of what's happening by making the mound with the mud is you're getting fermentation in the straw. So you're like multiplying its bioavailability, and
Yes.
it's actually literally creating minerals in there and doing all these amazing things. So you're really adding to it. What he did in the winter, I loved. I mean, he figured out how to garden a fairly large piece of property by just very few hours of one person over the course of a year. And what he did in the winter is he just sat around and he would gather the seeds that came in the fall, and then just make these little balls of with clay and 100 seeds, a variety of seeds. He figured this out by the end of his life, and then as he was talking about organic gardening, flying all over the world and seeing these deserts underneath him, he would, wherever he would go to a place, he would toss out these little balls of seeds into the desert, and what would grow, of the 100 seeds, certain ones would take to that particular location and start regreening the desert. So he lived to be either 99 or 100. He lived a really long life, and even as he got really old, he was able to transform the earth.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Because what I found is, let's say, we're dealing with an event in which we actually all have to grow our own veggies, and people
Mhm.
don't understand crop rotation and why it exists and why it's hard to grow the same crop 2 and 3 years in a row in the same area. Well, it's because you've depleted and you've taken away from a soil, because usually people, when they rip up their garden, they don't cut it up, mulch it up, and put it right back in and toss that soil and add to it during the time in which they're not growing things. Like if you go by farms, let's say you're growing soybeans or you're growing corn, it grows, and then they harvest it, and then there's some dead stuff hanging there. When they go, they cut it and it just sits there, but they're not adding lots of hay, lots of stuff to it,
Mhm.
and then kind of tossing it gently on a very small layer of the dirt to then bring stuff into it. They're just pretty much flattening it as they drive over it
Mhm. Well,
and
it's a
mulching it, but it's
monoculture.
not adding anything.
Yeah, they're trying to grow a monoculture, and one of the things that Fukuoka talks about is this forest garden that has many layers. That there's stuff growing on the bottom layer, and then there's bigger plants above that, and then trees above that
Yeah.
have fruit, and there's all this stuff happening all the time. on all the different layers of the canopy. So the forest is an actual canopy too. So and I think the discussion with Mandy, they were talking about monoculture, and that how that's what's happening. This everybody has to take the same medicine. Everybody has to do the same exact thing at the same time. It's like the epitome of monoculture, which is collapses. Those are not sustainable. They don't work, and they don't work.
They very much don't work. I remember a paper I was translating about 10 years ago in which the students showed that up and through around 1975, from the beginning of the century till 1975, there was rapid increase in the effective yield per acre of various crops. And then at some point between 1975 and 1995, it plateaued, and then it actually started to go down, and the biodiversity went down. For example, in the case of apples, there are more than in Europe, there are 300 varieties of apples, but only 6 are sold in the supermarkets. And because those 6, for some reason, are sold in the supermarkets, the farmers choose to grow those 6, and no one's growing the other 294 varieties.
John, I know exactly why that is. So we go apple picking in LJ, Georgia, and I asked this specific question because at the farm there, they have like 15 or 16 different varieties. But in the market, like if you're lazy and you don't want to go pick your own apples, they already have them picked. But there's only a bin with 6 or 7 of the varieties. Now, they're a little different than the grocery store. They might throw in some Arkansas Black or some Sugar Crisp or something as they come into season. But unless you're going every other weekend, you don't see it. But what happens is you have that first crop coming out, and because everyone's ready for apples and the drop price, those farms who only grow those get the contracts. So they supply a majority of the apples, and then people who are able to grow these other varieties or who are in areas that prefer those varieties, they'll get like a specialty thing at Trader Joe's or somewhere where you'll see, what's this apple? They get a Jazz or something out of the blue that like, oh, here's Red Delicious, here's Golden Delicious, here's Fuji, here's Granny Smith, here's Honey Crisp, right? But then out of the blue, it'll be some other variety, and you're like, oh, well, I'll try these. And it's because that just came in season. Maybe they've depleted their resources from their contracts, and you'll see that those companies who only grow that same variety reaches out to other apple orchards and will purchase all of a certain variety so that they can have it under their label, so that then they can sell it. So then that weird apple that pops out, you might have a price that's a little bit more than your other apples, but it's to add to that crop. There's a lot of that going on, and it usually has to do with contracts. And this is why I'm a big supporter of farmers markets. Like we have one on Forest Park off the interstate where all these farmers come. They literally set up, you can just drive your car around and say, I want to shop with this person. And then do you have organic? Well, this would have organic. So, and so you get to see multiple farmers and you get to see multiple varieties, but we can't go there all the time. But that's what I found, because I was like, where did some of my favorite apples go? Or, why, or is it these same varieties? I love apples and I love the varieties, but there's so many out there that I haven't ever tasted because they're never sold in public. And I would really, really like to taste them.
Well, I live in a real urban area, and we have this little co-op not too far I can walk to, and it has a year-round farmers market. And one of the things they do in the fall is, and there's a lot of ethnicity in some of the neighborhoods, so there's the Asian green people, and there's the Russian roots people, and there's people that have cultivated original, what do you call it, the seeds that aren't genetic. They've cultivated these apple trees or various fruit trees, and so part of the Harvest Festival is to sample all these varieties that you never get to see anywhere. So it's really a lovely thing to preserve those original seeds, and trees take a long time to grow. So it's wonderful to have that local in people's backyards. You know, these aren't orchards. These are just trees in people's backyards.
And just to let people know who might be grow or want it. Hey, you say, I can grow apples where I am. I want to start growing apples. Let me give you a couple of tips. Number one, your apple tree's not supposed to be pretty. Okay, that's number one. Get that out of your mind. Number two, you're going to get a lot of these little bitty apples popping out. Sorry, but you have to remove at least a third of them. You're going to have to remove at least a third of those little bitty clumps of apples coming up. And then as they're growing, the ones that aren't growing quite like, you're going to have to remove those as well. And then when you prune your apple tree, you're actually going to have to shape it like a bowl. You're going to have to prune from the inside, dipping down a bit and curving it upwards to encourage the upward growth. Because if an apple tree starts to do this, it's going to split. And it's going to be heavy, and it's going to cause a lot of damage. And then those pheromones on the tree are going to attract not very good insects. And you're going to have this cycle of the tree just decline. And also, what's really important that blesses your apple tree is that if you ever find that an apple has fallen, leave it. Leave it for the animals. Leave it for someone who just walks by. Don't try to go and grab all of them. If you're going to get your apples from a tree, pick it, take it inside. Anything that falls, leave it. It's a blessing to others. But if you're going to grow your own tree, just remember, you're going to want to hang on to all those little bitty nubs of apples. You're going to have to remove at least a third, sometimes a little more. And when you do prune it, you can't prune your apple tree more than a third. So don't wait 2 or 3 years to prune it. And now you really have to significantly prune it because that will stress it out as well. So those are a couple of tips on apple trees.
Well, my grandson loves those offerings from our neighbor's apple tree. He gets so delighted. Apple.
That's so cute.
Well, welcome, Tara. Hello.
I've been listening backstage, so I have some comments on what you were talking about. One of the things is that, and yeah, I love that about the urban ethnic foods. You know, that's one of the top things about, you know, any urban area is just the different ethnic and delicious things that you can come. And then if you live in the country, collect some for your family and bring it back home. But one of the things too, on talking about like crop rotation is the compost. I know in the springtime we were talking a lot about composting, and if you have like that whole year's worth of compost for your garden, coffee grounds, all scraps from cooking, vegetables, fruit, all that stuff. Not only does it give some little nibblings to our friends outside, but when you layer that with, you know, on your soil, but potentially maybe with like a new batch of soil, then it's going to add yearly instead of deplete, which is what we're talking about here. And I remember, Amber, you saying about, you know, and I have the tendency to do it. Not that I've, you know, I hope to be planting more, but you want to pack so it doesn't fall over, right? But you were talking about oxygen, and something about the straw that makes sense to the oxygen, and kind of like you were saying, this is so, I went my whole life with understanding what they meant about like the nooks and crannies of the, because I'm always like the English muffin, it goes everywhere, and my family's like, you know, if you wiggle it, the nooks and crannies. I'm like, oh, so that sounds like what you're saying about kind of like the pitchfork and the straw. Just get the nooks and crannies for the air to come through, but don't disturb the whole, you know, bio layers. And that's probably why they call them strawberries, right? They must grow good again in that way. But just something to think about, you know, we always have the thing that we're like, oh, they're doing it, whoever they is, and whether you look at it like that or not, variety, and we've talked about this, variety in plants and seeds and vegetables is a natural pesticide. So so even in the apple orchards, like even if they had more of a variety or fruits and peaches and stuff, just even putting them in the rows that is convenient for the shoppers, you know, good for business, but for nature, actually like mixing up as much as possible, you know, so that just like a natural garden, the variations come together in order to have like genetic diversity, and therefore the bacteria can't just come like crack the code of every single plant all at once. And I really do bring this analogy to what we're dealing with in the information world, because that 4 o'clock talking point, that's the poison of the whole garden all at once.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And one thing is, I remember probably, let's see, it must have been probably not, it would have been the later 90s in Austin, Texas. First time I had ever been there, I was traveling through, there was a Whole Foods. It was the first Whole Foods, and Whole Foods is a whole different thing now, of course.
Whole paycheck now.
Yeah, whole paycheck. But anyways, I was so impressed with just the selection. That was the first time I ever had like rice dream and rice milk and all this stuff. And I just wanted to throw that out there, but it wasn't that exact time. But sometime later, when it was another Whole Foods way later, and there was yellow watermelon, like a nice pale yellow watermelon. And you don't think of this like, why are we having this like super homogenized choice level, you know?
I really realized that living in Europe for a couple of years. There are all these different kinds of melons that we never saw. Different insides, different outsides, different sizes. They had little fist-sized watermelons in places where there wasn't a lot of water. You know, this was just in the Mediterranean. But yeah, it's a whole different bunch of varieties.
So I'll tell you what I learned. So there is the grouping of them manipulating the genetics of the fruit. I'm not in agreement with that. And then there's the grabbing an interesting cultivar of the plant. So let's say I find a hydrangea I really like. I'm like, oh gosh, this is beautiful. But I see on the stem this part of the hydrangea where the leaf venation is a little different. It has kind of two-tone, a light green and a dark green venation, and then the flower has a little bit of the cone on it has a bit of a different shape, and it's a little pale pink. I can take that, clip it, grab a regular hydrangea, like go to the store, get a regular hydrangea, cut it like 6 to 8 inches. Then I can attach that, graft that to it. Now I've used an actual root base, grafted that, and now I have a new plant. So that's really cool. You can do that with fruits. You can do that with vegetables. The bad thing is the GMOs, the chemicals, making it without seeds, making it where you've made some business opportunity to deprave others unless they go through you, because you've exploited your knowledge of it.
If you patent it.
Advantage of a system. And in that is very unhealthy. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for the soil. While you're pushing, you're environmentally safe and you're helping poor people in order to take over a whole industry. That's evil, disgusting, and unacceptable. But there is a difference. And I wish that the people out there who are talking about GMOs, that they would become knowledgeable about how a nursery, a wholesale nursery or a plant nursery does these cultivars and finds, oh my gosh, this watermelon came out orange. What? And everyone's like, oh, you got to take it here. And then they do it. And then now they've got a brand new watermelon. It's like sweet and tangy. And they're like, wow, and then they get a botanist to come in. Oh, I can see. And then they want to analyze the soil. And some people will take it to their local master gardener, get a soil, kind of where they test to see what's in the soil right there. And so there's a lot of like really cool science that goes into it. What's sad is we actually have people who in their heart, they're not actually a gardener, and they're not actually someone who wants to farm and wants to offer people some of these really amazing evolution of our plants and just, wow, look at this. And they exploit it. So you've got the Bill Gates of the world destroying what should be beautiful and what we should be discovering every single day. And then he's wanting to make it some monolith and then have it dictate over it and tell us about our own environment as he steals our opportunities to grow such things, where now you've got fruits and veggies that are seedless. No, we want the seeds. We need the seeds.
Part of that stealing is the idea of owning things, especially owning, things from nature. We're supposed to say you can't patent things from nature, but it's happening now. All these things are getting patented, maybe that have a teeny little change in them. And so there's ownership.
Yes.
And that's causing a real warpage of
Yes.
the possibilities, because it's limiting. And it's that whole idea, monoculture, and of monopoly.
Imagine what we would have if we had all these farmers sharing like what grew on their farm. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it was like, and there was no one trying to command that.
Mhm.
There was no one trying to say, oh no, hey, let me buy those rights from you. Let me do, like, we've turned into, and that's what gives small business owners, they're being tugged on both sides. On the side that's like, we don't need business, we need to get rid of the monetary system, the free market is destroying us. Well, they're like, but I'm not. This is my survival. And then on the other side, they're trying to gobble you up or shut you down or push you down. And so that's like, where do these small businesses belong? And then when we stand up for ourselves, we're either having to explain ourselves to one side or the other. And it's exhausting. And then it encourages everyone to just work for the government. And then they make all our decisions,
I think the fact
I'm not
that
okay with.
The monopolists have used the federal government to build their monopolies, used all those contracts and all our tax money. So yeah, it seems like it's time to reverse that flow and get it more even. Yeah, go ahead, Tara.
Well, one thing that I remember, like, I'm sure that there's things that we all planned on doing at the beginning of the past wave that we've been on, you know what I mean? And then we get caught up in things that we have to do, So one of the things that you girls were making me think of was, I know Arizona has a seed bank for native seeds.
Nice.
And they call it a library too, because they actually let people in the community come get a bunch of seeds, and they're supposed to return seeds. So in my planning a few years ago, before I knew we were going to have to fight such a intense force, I was like planning on trying to kind of get, see about it, see what we could get, see what they need, get involved somehow, spread that out, The other thing that's interesting about, as we realize what we don't want, we're going to be really happy to have opportunities for what we do want. So I just want to say, in a way that people understand, that right now you can go to ivortothemectin.com, and that is all about, as we've talked about, the macrophage, whatever, the soil. And so you can, on that website, you can also look exactly what's in it and see that what we're talking about with just the healingness of the simple, things in the earth. Another brand that is interesting that also came to my attention is rootsbrand.com. And so luckily, when I came across this the other day, I had already kind of researched the doctor that did this. I forget her name right now, but she's great. And nothing against, here's the thing, is that we have healers that come from all different arenas, people that are trained in the very, they paid a lot of money for schooling and all this. They're kind of geared towards trying to get a patent. Okay. So if someone has a patent, like this doctor happens to, nothing against them, because I met some people, they want the convenience of it and pay $74 a bottle, whatever. That's not really the real reality that we're in for everybody right now, to say the least. And so, see what's in that, see what's in their product. This one happens to be concentrated sea salt. I know she does a lot of stuff with zeolite. Point being, they have to charge a lot because they've paid a lot for the education and they've paid into this patent thing and whatever. But you can get the same effects by finding out what's in them and finding them for a better price and still able to, use those as medicine.
Yeah, I think there's also a whole big movement of just publishing, getting a patent and then publishing it all for free. I think that Paul Stamets did that. He got patents on certain what happened in the mycelium world that was so amazing, and just let people, he owned it, so nobody could take it away, but he gave it away for free. And that's kind of happening. I did the show on the low energy nuclear reactions last night with John. And that's what some of these scientists are doing. They're getting it out there and publishing it and letting people spread it around and be able to understand that there are simple machines that can pull energy and free hydrogen, and all this stuff is available, and it's been around for hundreds of years and thousands of years in some of these actual devices even, and their reactors. So that's more and more people are doing the anti-patent thing by just putting the recipes out there.
But wait, how is he
call them recipes?
How is he patenting though? What is he doing to change it to be a patentable form?
Well, by publishing them and allowing people to use it for free. That's what he's doing different. He's saying nobody else can take this away from me because I figured it out, but it is a natural thing. So anyone can use this in their products. Anyone can use this, and no one, as long as you're making a fair amount and not owning it, nobody can own it because I've given it back. So that's a way to go around
recipes.
Sharing recipes. Let's call it recipes.
Instead of going to Publix and getting your chocolate silk pie, make the chocolate pie your grandmother's recipe. Pull out your recipe book and make what your grandmother always made. Look at it from the perspective of, how I look at it is like it's economical. It means you're being frugal. You're also making sure every ingredient and everything that's in it. It's safer for you because you touched each thing that you're adding to it. And so that in itself gives you a good, you're not as, they're in the back of your mind. You're not like, well, I wonder what else is in this. I'm not the one who did this. I don't know what's within this thing. And I think that's, we've reached that part in society where, when you're lied to, there's a reason why it damages trust. There's a reason why you become, a recluse. That's what was so amazing is when you've been lied to by the science community, the political class, by every community there is. And then when they give you like a demand or a mandate, or they say, I know what's best for you. It's like, no. Here's the deal. You've burnt me before. I carried your water. I looked like a fool. And when I went to you to find out why you gave me that water to carry, you were nowhere to be found. Now here you are again telling me to carry your water, but I know you're not going to be there to support me after I do. And if I look like a fool or make a mistake because I trust you, that's on me this time, because you've already proven that you can look me directly in the eye. And because the basis of money, for political prowess, for whatever reason that you feel it necessary to make this demand on me, I'm the fool if I haven't learned from the first time. Right. And so I don't understand some of the smartest people in the room going, why are we getting such pushback? Because the trust is gone. It's been gone for a long time. And if I love my family and you're wanting me to be responsible, you're wanting to use my brain, you depend upon people that are active in society, who are not a risk, who are hardworking and kind and use their brain. And then when we do use our brain, you're like, what's wrong with you? Well, we learned from what you taught us, which is do not trust.
Yeah, I think the reason the trust is gone is because so much has been done in secret, and so much has been done by deception and telling the not truth. And I love the idea that, patents are secrets and patents are owned and recipes are not secrets. Recipes are shared.
Yes.
And maybe if we can shift that thinking into free sharing of important things that need to be spread around.
Let me tell you, Carol, listen to the, like you just said something, my grandmother, I never realized how deep what she said meant until you just said that. Holy cow. So for a long time, she wouldn't share her pie, cake, stew, or chili recipes with anybody. And I kept saying, Mama, and no one else wanted to cook them but me. Mama, share them with me. She said, if I share them with you, then you may not come and visit me. I need you to come to visit me. Therefore, I'm withholding this. But if I look at it, and then later when she shared it with me, she said, I know that you love me and you're going to come visit me because I'm your mama. Here you go. Nobody else had asked me for them. And I didn't know what to say, but it's just best that I share them with you. Here you go, sweetie. Now, imagine that. It's somebody who doesn't want to share with us what they're doing because they need us to go through them to get it. Like they're the arbiter.
Right. That's the
what you
monopolist.
can and can't have. And it's like she realized that and she did it in jest. She turned right around and gave them to me. But when she did it and then she came to me and said, no, here you go. That is such a huge lesson. I didn't know how it actually soaked in until you just said that. And I was like, that's what she meant. Holy cow. You know, someone's like, well, you're not going to know what to do with it. You're not going to be able to cook it like me. You're not. And plus, you need to come through me because, hey, I'm your friend. You're my friend. But they don't talk about the money and what they benefit from you doing just that. Right. And that's the exploitation. And that shouldn't be okay.
Right. So if we're really going to do this one world thing, it needs to be based on sharing and trust and not secrets and monopolies. And
they won't do it that way. That's why I'm not for it.
Yeah,
Because
that's why we
not
got
going to do it that way.
We got to let them eat themselves.
Well, that's one thing that's important to note is that we are being transformed from a high trust society into a very low trust society. And that is a large part of the breakdown of, most of the problems that we're seeing in the public sphere. And they're constantly messaging us, don't trust anyone, don't trust anyone. Oh, but you can trust the GMO corn and you can trust the vaccine makers. Those people you can trust, but only those.
Well, I have a good example of that happened to me this week. I got a weird text message. It said, your card's turned off for fraud or whatever, call this number. But the message looked weird. You know, it didn't look like the bank normally doing this. So I called my bank and got in a line of, 30 people waiting to talk to the bank about whatever. And when I finally got up there, what I guessed was that it wasn't real anyway. It was a fake out. But it just reminded me of this no trust idea. I actually saw that on a presentation, Department of Defense presentation. This idea of no trust means everybody has to always prove themselves all the time. So I had to go through this big thing whenever the bank decides there's a fraud, and they're actually, even if there isn't one, you have to prove yourself. You have to say all your secret numbers and all your dog's names and all this ridiculous stuff. You have to remember it all, whatever you wrote down on some form 20 years ago or 10 years ago. It's ridiculous to have to reprove ourselves all the time because of this no trust. It's not just a no trust environment, it's a no trust operation. That's what we have to realize. This has been the wool pulled over our eyes. And it's time to say, okay, we do trust each other, but we don't trust you.
I think it's very important to teach young men and young women how to establish trust in their peers.
Exactly.
And also, let's not forget, all good relationships are built on trust. Our money system is built on trust. Our, any kind of high functioning system, piloting, we have to have that level of trust. But I do feel like starting off with a suspicious angle is healthy, especially right now. You know, you don't have to like remain suspicious, but you know, enter, look around, be like, huh, that thing might be a little off. We'll see. This
Well,
person,
we've
oh,
been
maybe.
tricked. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've been tricked majorly. And so you got to wonder when there's people like Elon Musk all of a sudden rising up over everybody and saying what a great guy he is and how smart he is and how wonderful, and he's giving us, you know, trust back.
Yeah.
And then saying, oh, but you still have to go through the Trusted News Initiative.
Well,
It's
what I found
crazy.
is,
You know, we do need to up our antlers. Our
yeah,
okay, what's going
what I
on
figured
here?
out, like in our house, the kids got into this habit where they would say they did their homework, and then I'd get an email from the teacher, and it was like he didn't finish his math, and so I'd pick them up from school, and I'd be like, hey, I got an email from your teacher, and so I learned you pull over, and you say, here, read this email, and you make them read it, and then you say, is this the homework that I asked you if you completed yesterday? And then they can't look you in the eye and they go, well, I forgot, and they're like, okay, what do you think the consequence should be? Well, I forgot. Okay, so I'll chalk it up to you forgot. Get home. And so then the next time they do it, then you say, okay, we've got a pattern here. I asked you. That means you look to see if you've done all your homework. If you don't look and you just say you did it, you haven't checked. And now you're saying you forgot. Now we're going to print out the piece of paper at the beginning of the week that your teacher gives you that says what all you're going to have to complete by the end of the week. And now it's going to go on the refrigerator. And now I get to say, have you done this, this, and this? And so then we went through that and I was like, Mom, I told you I did it. Let me see it. Well, why? Because I don't trust you. Why don't you trust me? Because you're not being honest. And if you're not going to be honest, then you have to go through these steps because now you've lost my trust and you have to earn it back. This is how it's around here. Once you've lied, now I'm going to question. Now I have to do my due diligence because fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You're not fooling me twice. Until you've built that trust back up, we're good. You know, and whatever topic, whether it's homework, whatever it is, when you destroy that trust, now you're going to have to go through all kinds of questioning. I'm going to give you the side eye. I'm going to want evidence, and I'm going to want you to state how and why I should trust you. And I'm going to need your consistency. And now your oops, I forgot is going to fall on deaf ears. I'm going to be like, well, I don't even trust that you forgot. I don't know if you forgot or you purposely did it. So, you know, we have an issue here because, you know, my kids have to learn if I go out into the world and I'm not trustworthy, how can I demand the world be like, how can I demand they be honest with me? So the most important thing, and then you can make your demand. If you're an honest friend, you're an honest family, you're an honest person, you have every right to complain about how we're being treated right now. But if you yourself deal in all kinds of deception and trickery and manipulation and all these things, and then you're like, I can't believe this science community is lying, and that, well, that's what you do. Like, aren't these your kindred spirits? Like, isn't this who you really are on the inside? Like, to make that demand and to have that demand be heard and actually have the power to push back with great strength, you yourself have to have that character in which people can trust you because your consistency. I'm trying to teach the kids that, but you know, it's fun and it's interesting because of what they show you, but it's a hard road ahead. Now imagine all those people out there who were never taught that their parents just let them do it. Like, these are who's roaming around right now, manipulating the pants off of us.
And one of the other things that, you know, we talked a little bit about last week, some of the abuse patterns coming out in art. Well, you know, that's one of the things that the abusers do to break these people is at a young age, they show them that they can't trust anybody, that there's nothing they can trust. And a lot of even some of the social ideas that the social engineers are pumping out right now, it's like you can't trust anything. Everything's in the eye of the beholder, even the very body you're in, even the very ground you stand on, you know? So it is kind of disruptive, and it goes both ways. So at the same time where the powers that would like to destabilize us, they don't want us to have any trust on those stabilizing forces in our life, but at the same time they want blind trust, just like in a dogmatic way.
Yes.
And that's why, for me, and I've said this before, body language is so key. And even throughout this whole journey of trying to figure out who is a good guy, who's a bad guy, who's doing this, who's doing what, my decisions that I've made based on body language always pans out to be the right direction. So it's one of those things that we've talked about is, observing and like, sometimes those of us that are paying attention to our communications, those micro expressions jump out. It'll be like, whoa, like time slows down because you just see it, and those things are important because that we really need to feel our way. And not to mention that, to put it simply, we have an evil force here, a small little teeny evil force that we can crush, that just goes into whatever group are supposed to be the good guys and says, yeah, get them. Yeah, get them. But they just keep on jumping around to anybody that's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They move around. They have no loyalty, no level of integrity.
Yeah.
Well, I think our earlier discussion about discernment, that Amber brought up, that's how you're right. It's the micro expressions. And we just need to be really careful, especially of the ones that are taking up the space and telling us what to think, and in a way that makes us want to trust them, because we want to trust somebody. We don't want to think everybody's a creep, and everybody's not a creep. We know that.
Yes.
But the people that are speaking with the biggest megaphones seem to have a credibility problem. When you really use your discernment or look under, I call it peeking under the covers, you can pretty easily do a little bit of research and figure out, no, something's wrong here.
Yeah, body language. I'm glad Tara brought that up. It's so important because usually when you've got someone who's good natured, right, and they're caught in deception, they can't look in your eyes, right, because they know, oh God. And that's the main thing I see in my kids. Like, they look down, they kind of shift, they try to distract, or they find something in their pocket, anything. And I'm like, hey, look right here. And they're like, okay, because they know they're caught. They can't look at me in the eyes. When you're dealing with really bad deception is when they can get in front of a microphone, stare right into it, tell everybody this is what's going on, not even flinch. And then you find documentation after documentation that they were full of crap. And you're like, now that's a whole other level of deception. That's like someone who prides himself on beating a lie detector test. Like, oh, look what I can do in my mastery of deception, right? And so there's lots of people who are human and they do something and they really don't want to get in trouble, or they feel ashamed. That body language is like, oh, don't, like some cartoon music, got caught again. But then the people who are, really malicious and have zero integrity will look straight at you and go, God's honest truth.
Well, that was a very, what impressed me was when Mike Pompeo went to, I think it was Texas A&M, and he told the kids there, the graduate students, that he had actually gone to school to learn how to beat a lie detector test and how to cheat and how to kill and everything else. And, as part of the CIA, that they actually trained to be deceptive.
Yes. And in today's
they go to clown school.
They're training kids to not go home and tell their parents what they're learning. I mean, I'm finding people that would be so upset about the tactics of the CIA, doing it on a day-to-day basis, like people who talk about, oh, this is so bad, and then when you confront them about, are you teaching our kids this? Well, actually, we're not. And I'm like, okay, the boogeyman that you explained, you're on that team. Like, you've got teammates all soul connected by soul and spirit. They are each other's twins, like pointing out the other one, like, that's the bad one. No, that's the bad one. And they're all being jackwads, right? And it's like, no. Like, yeah, I've got questions over here, but now, sucker, I've got questions about you. Like, be honest. What are you hiding here? That's malicious intent. Not okay with it.
Yeah, it's funny because someone just recently, I forget who it was that I was listening to, they was talking about who has a seat at the table, and there is very applicable good times for discernment and discrimination. And when you're thinking about who has a seat at the table, you're not talking about how many seats there are. You're talking about intention,
Yes.
So those that lie on purpose, those are the ones that don't have the seat at the table. Everyone else that's maybe a little bit confused, or it's cute because when you were saying the animation, like I
Yeah.
love Japanese animation, so in that situation, like they get embarrassed, they turn into like little kid them real quick. They're
Yeah.
like, oh well, me as a kid, oh whoops, sorry. It's like we all make mistakes and we don't have to all know everything, but those that are literally lying on purpose, whereas there's just no room for that. This is how we need to break down things in our society and be like, oh, just because we like somebody and they mean well doesn't mean that we can't say, wait a minute, where did you hear that from?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just the whole thing of figuring things out shouldn't be like an offensive thing. It's supposed to be just figuring things out.
And when someone's made a mistake, because we all make mistakes, the big thing is that you feel bad. Like you feel a little bit of inner shame. Oh, look what I did. And you're reflective, right? That's when you know what? I have so much forgiveness for this person. Like you can totally tell, their emotions got the best of them, or they weren't thinking, or they just wanted that. I just wanted to go out with my friends. Like, sorry, mom and dad, I lied. And then their body language is like, oh, why did I do that? That's so much easier to deal with and to face. But someone who will just look you straight in the eye and try to make you feel like a lesser person because they have a motive, or they actually have a reason to get them to that next place they want to be, and it's so self-serving for themselves or their group. They pretty much said, I don't consider you anything other than something to toss around and manipulate. You're nothing to me. And I don't even feel shame doing this.
Mm-hmm.
That's unacceptable.
Yeah, and that you don't matter. I think we all like to participate and we like to solve problems, and that's what we do as humans. But if we're given really bad information and asked to solve a problem, it's impossible to come up with a good answer. So getting the right information as input is so important.
Yes.
And that's what we
You know
don't
what
have right
is
now.
you know what's so key about this? This is excited me just the other day because I realized, Carol, what you're just saying, it's algebra. It's algebraic equations, because you're like, where y equals 5, where we understand this truth to be true,
Mm-hmm.
this equals that. But if you change the meaning of y, then we have a different equation. So you literally need to say where x is this and y is this, it's always going to work out like this. And so that's basically what we're saying. That's the defining that we need to do right now, is saying where
that's
a biological
point.
This is why they changed the definition.
I never understood it.
Remember this?
Well, and it's the algorithm problem. If you have bad assumptions going in, you're going to have really bad, results of what you think is going to happen. So we're told, well, this many people might have died from COVID, but that's based on these faulty assumptions, of like not realizing we have a natural immunity system here that is going to mitigate it. It's like we're not taking that into account. So the projections are wrong, and all of the rules are based on those wrong assumptions that get us someplace that we don't want to be.
Yeah, imagine this is why they actually changed the definition of words, right? Because it changes the algebraic equation, and it changes how people respond to it. So if you have the stated word for what it meant, then there's no way to manipulate, because it's what it is. But if you change that very definition, you've changed the algebraic equation, and now we have to try to figure out how people are going to respond to it, because it's a new equation, and then they can manipulate our youngest, because they've never been aware of that definition in the fact of how it became what it's meant for this long. And then that splits them from other generations that understand that definition and understand a game is being played. And then of course the kids are like, but this algebraic equation means this because of this definition. You're just an old fuddy-duddy, or you just don't understand. And that's why they do it. So looking at it from even the perspective of how they capture children, because they changed the very definition of words.
They're
Exactly.
twisted. Yeah, the twisted
Exactly.
words.
And this reminds me of what we've talked about before on why they pluck a biological term like CIS and try to put it into a world of social theorizing, because because you take numbers which are defined and words which are a little bit more they're defined but not as clearly, so again, equity, this is a financial term, and you pluck that out and then you place it in this social stuff where it gets all muddy, so the whole idea is, again, let's define things. Let's go on a marketing rampage of being like, a woman equals a vagina, whatever. You know what I mean? Something. Well, it doesn't have to be that, but
what I've done, because arguing with people is just not working. Everyone's so polarized. I just take a word and I'll put the definition. So I'll put integrity, and it's just the definition. Or I'll put dominance. I'll put the definition. Fascism. Put the definition. Like where you see, fascism is where the government runs all the corporations and companies and they merge together, right? And that's it. It's just the definition. And then silence, crickets, and then someone will private message, and it's just the you didn't have to argue pro, against, here's the definition.
Well, that's a really interesting example, fascism, because fascia in our body is what connects everything to everything. So it's been twisted to mean this whole warped thing of government and big business colluding, when it's really everything is connected to everything with electricity, with our whole inner spirit. It is connected, but we don't want to twist it.
So they want to be the big muscle. No, we say no.
Yeah, we're all the little parts, and we have to listen to each other to make the solutions and to know how to move the arm, or it's all there when we have a direction that comes from our inner knowing. Then it's all put together automatically. We don't have to go around backwards and forwards trying to figure things out. It's all there.
Yes. And I feel like if what I found is the easiest solution sometimes works the best. You see, they changed its definition, or they're doing this. You know what? Maybe people don't know the original definition. Let me just lay it out there, and then some people are like, and then the next time they see the manipulation of the definition, they're like, that's not the definition. Or somebody who's saying, they don't understand that we censor on social media because we listen to the science, and the grocery stores are listening to the science and this, and then they see the definition of fascism and they're like, they've been led that fascism is just some white nationalists marching around in Charlottesville, but they don't
with guns
say that they were freaking paid, that half of them came there for a theater show. They don't mention that, but then people think that's what fascism is. Then you put the definition up there and then they're like, oh, that's uncomfortable, and sometimes you just throw out just the basic info and then it makes them go, I sounded like a goober.
Exactly. You just put the Italian thing. I was going to say, because I thought it sounded Italian, because the other thing that I was thinking is that I think Antifa is not anti-fascist, but it's antifaz, which is mask in Italian.
Well, what is the basis of a fascia? The basic idea is that the individual reed is very weak, but if you bind many reeds together, then they're stronger. And but you have to apply some kind of external force, or in this case, a piece of metal that is not a fascia, not one of the group, to bind the group together. So I don't know whether they're thinking maybe it's AI. AI is the external binding force. But where have I heard the term stronger together?
Yeah.
Kiako percento, 100%.
Great glory. What did it say? I missed it. Sorry. What'd you have up there?
I'll put it back up.
Yeah.
But
I just think
the
that's why they
fascia.
changed the definition. And I think anytime we see them change the definition, there should be a campaign where we all put the actual definition of it.
Even though there's a lot of young people, especially college students, who say, "Oh, communism and fascism, they're different things." Well, not so much
really
anymore. Not with technology.
They're actually the same.
They're actually the same. Yeah.
Stronger
but
together.
People don't understand Hitler had a socialistic fascism, so it was more based on the poorer middle class. They were under a socialistic system where the upper echelon, were the ones that were able to, be part of that economic boom. And that's why you saw this huge wealth transfer during this whole time. But, you still have government that's intruding into just basic business and holding others down in order to put them into like a conglomerate, and that's they're a lot alike. So when people, want to throw, "Oh, you're communist or you're fascist," they're kind of the same. And that's where we're getting manipulated. We're calling our neighbors these things rather than understanding that we're being led to call them these things when they have no power. Like my neighbor has no power, and yet I'm calling him something that shows power and dominance and death. And yet the people who are actually doing it are feeding me the information to call my neighbor that name.
Yeah, and it's just calling people names. I mean, we all know that names are just names, and rude names just are there to make people angry, and that's what happens.
Yeah,
and you can hear the intention in someone's tone, so you find out that actually tone is even more important than words, and when the tone and the words don't match, or when they do match, that matters. And I think a huge takeaway from this part of the conversation is just the fact that this is one of the reasons why, again, we're going to talk about they want us to not have a diversity of languages, because when you have a diversity of languages, then what we're talking about here is more on the table, where you're like, "Oh, well, we meant it like this," or we say it like this, or our slang, these phraseology. And if you just have a monolithic language, like, yes, there are trade languages that, maybe Celtic, English, different ones that help on the trade route, but just being able to have those other languages to not just compare how people say things, but the literal way that they see the world. Because a lot of our language shapes the way that we see the world, even though it was formed vice versa. So we the more we can explore with our language, the more diverse we understand the world to be, and the less stuck we get in just seeing things in one way.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. We do need all our diverse opinions to sort things out, and to figure it all out so it really does work instead of falls apart.
If we don't have that diversity, that's when the arts goes away, because half of the things that we have, the classic music, the poems, the beautiful writings, the paintings, come from their experiencing something other than themselves. It comes from emotions, but it's hard to have emotion if everyone's the same. You learn so much just by looking at a child and you're older, or seeing things through someone else's view, and you can't do that if you've crammed everyone into one way of thinking, one world dominance, one world order. That takes away some of the most beautiful things that humans have created. And I don't think we were all given different fingerprints so that we could all be the same.
Well, that's maybe a great way to end it. I'm in the leaf blowing situation again, so it's really loud and I can't really talk
But,
anymore.
but
It's been
Carol,
a
you should
couple
think
hours.
of every leaf should be thought of as an idea. And the leaf blower makes all the ideas tumble around. That's what we need.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay, everything's getting kicked up and up for the grabbing.
Yeah.
All right,
thank
well,
you.
everybody, get your December on, get your 2022 on. You know where we're going.
And tomorrow at noon, George Webb video watch party.
All right.
All right, awesome. See you then.
All right.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
ladies.
Eat, eat.
Eat, eat.